Are you prepared for that day? Are you prepared for the afterlife? Have you thought about prearranging your own funeral? And with me this morning, Miss Ozella J. Foster. I know that name rings a bell. Ozella is Ted Foster's sister. Ted Foster owned a mortuary on Grand Avenue for many of a year. Now, Ted has tossed the baton to his sister Ozella, and now Ozella has her own mortuary. Good morning, Ozella. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm fine. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Ozella, can you give us some advice on how to prepare our own funeral so our loved ones don't have to carry that burden?
Steve, one of the things that we as a people, we used to call these prearranged funeral services burial plans. So when you talk to the general public, you can't really hype it up. You've just got to be down front. You've got to say exactly what it means. Prearranged burial plans is one of the best things that we could ever do for our families and our surviving family. To prearrange is one of the things that I really take pride in. I've done that under my brother, but now as my own establishment, I also still do it. I've done it for about 30 years.
Really?
Yes. I've been doing this for 30 years
So when it
now.
comes to prearranging, you are the queen of prearranging here in St. Louis.
I won't say I'm the queen, but I'm good at it.
How do I make my wishes known to my family?
You literally pick up the phone and you call me at the funeral home and we sit down and we go over your wishes. First of all, we are going to establish where do you need to stay financially. Many times people will go into the funeral home as well as sitting in the comforts of their own home, and they can let their heart spend emotionally. But the best thing about thinking realistically and in advance, you are the person that will control what it is you spend. So you now sit down and realistically spend money on your final obligations. That's how you do it, because you're going to say, well, what's realistic? I'm going to tell you what is needed. And you say, well, either I want or I like or I can't afford. I tell people all the time, don't put the monies in the ground. Spend what you need to spend from it from the beginning, so that your family can say, or you would tell your family, how much is too much.
Let's say, for instance, insurance. Insurance will tell you how much that you should have or for a burial plan, right?
Yeah, well, you know what it do, but also a life insurance sometimes is not always the best way to do this. Because if you take out life insurance, you're going to leave that for your family to survive off of. Well, one of the best things about prearranging a funeral is I'm going to be able to freeze that cost. So if I go out and you and I sit down right now and we write up a $5,000 funeral, that $5,000 funeral is going to stay $5,000 until the day you make that transition. So nobody can add to it, nor can they take it away, because you have what you call pre-arranged, irrevocable, prepaid burial plans, meaning that me, Miss Ozella Foster, cannot keep your money. I have just a certain length of time to put that money into a registered FDLIC trust.
Explain to me, what's the FD?
LIC
trust.
That is a federal protected way that the master account have to go into a bank, and that bank is the master trust holder. So it's governed by federal law. Let me just use a good example, and I just keep it real.
Okay.
My brother went out of business. So when my brother closed his businesses, hundreds of people had burial plans. And those burial plans, they were afraid. Miss Foster, what about my money? Miss Foster this, Miss Foster that. I was able to say to them, Ted Foster does not own your burial plan. Your money is in the bank. Mm-hmm. Your money is under the trust account. So at that rate, even if you don't go out of business, I can take my money and transfer to funeral home A, B, or C. So I'm protected in the event that I just want to transfer.
With this economy being so high right now, what is the average cost for a funeral?
The average funeral today is anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000.
And that does not count the actual grave digging or anything like that, does it?
It can, if you think realistic. If you are a person that does not want to go for the hype of a funeral, you can simply say, well, Ms. Foster, I just want what I need. I want basics. Some people will say, well, I want a little bit more than basics. So when you say from $5,000 to $8,000, you can pretty much do a very good service. And if you say, I don't want to spend but $7,000, but I want my grave to be included, then that's where I come in and say, well, what cemetery do you want? Because some cemeteries require certain things to go there.
Okay, the cemeteries and grave diggers are completely separate, am I right?
No, the grave diggers are the people who prepare your grave inside of a cemetery.
Okay, so the cemetery owns their own grave diggers.
The cemetery well, they don't own them, but what it is there are people who are in the union, so they work for the cemetery.
Okay.
So St. Peter's owns the grounds, the church owns the grounds, but you are an employee of them. Okay. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so at that rate, but there is a way that you can also pre-do that, because you can take your grave, go to the cemetery that allow you to pre-own, and the concept is the same. I can freeze the cost of my actual burial grounds today by prepaying it. Certain cemeteries will allow you to do that.
Let's say, for instance, I set my prearranged plan with you.
Okay.
I pass. And let's say, for instance, the money that I have given you may be a little low with the economy. So you say, for instance, an average funeral is $5,000 now these days. Maybe if I just had something that was maybe $2,000, what would happen then with my plan?
If you go below what's average, one of the purpose for sitting down with the funeral director and putting together the funeral, you're going to buy merchandise at today's price. So the law does not allow me to cheapen what you buy. I have to have what you call a general price list that every funeral home has, that the state law, federal law, and the Federal Trade Commission says when you walk in that door, you are obligated to show the person what you charge. I can't charge you no more than what I charge Joe Blow. So everybody has to go by the same price list.
Okay.
And so that price is, you're going to freeze the price. So when you give me your money, your price is frozen. As long as you pay it out, now you have a frozen funeral for the rest of your life.
Okay, Ozella, let me throw something at you.
Come on with it.
I had an aunt that prearranged her funeral back in 1965. She passed in 1989. With the economics and the price of living, what kind of funeral would she be able to have? Because the average funeral back then was $3,000, maybe two,
$2,900 or
right.
so. Well, the purpose of prearranging as well, when you put your money into a trust account, well, it's going to create a little interest. The purpose of prearranging is to freeze that cost, and so you can't touch the interest until I prove to you that person is no longer on the face of the earth. So if I use your facility and I prearranged on your funeral home back in the day,
right,
you can't charge my family. However, it is based upon everything that you put into that plan as to what you're going to pay when that person dies. Now, naturally, there are certain things that you cannot control, and that's the cost of federal tax.
Right.
You really can't charge me tax until I literally pass away, because the tax is going to be something that
but
you don't have. You got no control over that.
So instead of my dead aunt passing away to take care of the remaining business, that would come to the family. Am I right?
Well, in essence, it could and it could not, because my loyalty to your funeral home was you allowed me to freeze it. So because you allowed me to freeze it, you realize I'm going to get a little interest. Most of the time, 99% of the time, when you want to do a burial plan, go to your funeral home of choice. Sit down with the funeral home owner or the funeral director and simply tell them everything. You can see people that come to your doors or put it in the mail. You don't want to do that. You want to go to your funeral home and say, okay, look, Miss Foster, I want everything to whereas my family does not have to pay a dime when I pass away. And that's the purpose of prearranging. You're making good, strong, sound decisions.
How do I guarantee my funeral expenses?
You're going to guarantee your funeral expenses because on the trust application, you have a one that will say none guaranteed and a box that will say guaranteed. Now, Let's say, for instance, my family has always used, say, your facility. If my family has always used your funeral home, that's my in-kind working relationship with you. Well, I trust the family. You trusted me to use my plan.
Right.
And so because you came to me, I would be less than a person to simply say, well, I'm going to just charge you this much today and charge your family down the road. That's not how you do that. You cannot build or grow a funeral service without loyalty to your clients.
How much money can a person put down when it comes to prearranging their funeral?
What happens is when you sit down and you pick out everything that you want, there is no limit on what I want to do. I might have somebody that walks in and say, okay, I want to pay it all. You may say, well, look, I can't afford to do that, but I can give you this much down.
Right.
And I want to make monthly payments. Based upon the urgency of why you're prearranging, you can stretch it up to 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. Based on your age. Let's say you're going to retire. You're 55 years old and you're thinking about what's going to happen for the future. Well, you can say to your wife or whoever you want to relieve this burden off of, I want to be able to write my service so that when I leave the job, my final obligation, which, by the way, is your funeral, this final obligation has been completed. So I want to take 10 years. I want to pay just a little bit every month until I pay this off. You simply say, well, I want to just take 4 years and pay it off. You divide your cost by that 48 months, and that's what you would pay monthly. Okay. So you can set your time. You, the consumer, controls everything you do when it comes to a pre-need plan. The funeral home just supplies the service, merchandise, and goods.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, that's all.
Our conversation this morning is with Miss Ozella J. Foster with Ozella J. Foster Funeral Services. We'll be right back after this.